Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Bald Avenger Show. Episode 101, brother. 101.
Awesome.
It is awesome. And I'm Jason Cisneros, also known as the Bald Avenger, the tattoo guru, the purveyor of all things common sense, king of the Misfit Nation, and a legend in my own mind, brother. In my own mind. Okay, I have to tell people that every once in a while because they get upset. They forget that I joke. They forget I'm a comedian. So I'm excited about today's conversation with Louis. We've become friends over the last couple of years, and I've watched his journey. You're going to be hearing a lot more from him and about him as he's beginning his journey. I think he's already been on it for a while, moving towards being on stage. He's done some things, said some things that have impacted me in other areas, specifically in the way that he looks at relationship, and we'll share some of that as we go. But this is going to be a fairly impactful conversation for those of you that are thinking about your journey or switching up your approach, or paying attention to those small promptings in your life that may seem small in the moment, but then they end up being life-changing trajectory. Like it just takes your life in another trajectory, but you need to be paying attention to them. And this gentleman, one of the things that I admire most about him is he's constantly paying attention to the small messages that are out there where they pass by most people, but he stops them, he contemplates them, which is actually the very definition of intellect, is being able to hold two ideas in your mind at the same time, be able to compare them and be able to come out with a better answer than being on one side or the other. So I'll let you do a little intro of yourself, give a little bit of your story and how this whole relationship sort of came to be, and then we'll just have a discussion and let people know who you are.
Perfect. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, brother.
So I grew up in Indiana and grew up really poor. And as a kid, I watched my dad struggle in his ability to provide for our family. We had 13 kids, and it seemed pretty traumatic as a kid to not have the things that you needed. And that created something inside of me that I remember one day thinking, I don't ever want to live how I'm living now. And I don't want my kids to feel that insecurity and that unknowingness of, am I going to have enough money to buy shoes or, buy clothes or whatever that might be. And so as a kid, I always watched my dad talk to these men, and I would think, are they teaching him how to be rich, how to get money? Because we have none,
Right.
Anyway, so that I realized like that put a drive in me and created this passion of, I wanted to learn everything I could possibly learn so I wasn't in that same scenario,
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, I lost a job, was on welfare for a while, got started in the title insurance business, started to become successful in that and started to grow, and it was incredible. And it was something that I remember I was coming home one day, seeing my car in my house, and I just cried because I thought, this is impossible. This is what I was always hoping for as a kid, that I would be able to show up to a house that was normal, that you weren't embarrassed of having your friends over because it was just like a hoarder's house, And anyway, so I grew the company that I did, and I got to a point where I just kept having this nagging feeling that I'm supposed to do something more than, supposed to be more than just the owner of this title company and doing what I was doing. And
I just want people to hear, like as he speaks, just remember that these interviews are yes, they're about our stories. Yes, they're about Louis' story, but it's always about where it's impacting you in your life. And so I want you to hear that, of that push, the thing that brings us all together, the people, why you watch the Bald Avenger show in the first place, why the thing that brought us together is that inner voice saying, I know that I'm capable of more than I am producing right now. Right?
Yeah, that was it. And what was interesting was, in this journey, how people would say to me, your real gift is coaching and speaking and inspiring people. What are you doing in the title insurance business? It's not even close. And so but I had this nagging feeling that honestly gave me anxiety. I could feel this weight in my chest, and it just felt like I wasn't doing. You know how when you have something undone, you know you didn't do something that you told somebody you would do, and you're like, oh, they're going to get mad at me tomorrow, or whatever that deadline is coming up. Well, that's how I felt just every day. And I was just sick of it. And so one day I'm sitting at my desk at home. It was a Sunday afternoon, and just writing in my journal and just thinking, like, what do I do? And I prayed, and I asked, and in my prayer, I just said, God, if I'm supposed to do this, because people say this is my gift, and I don't see it, because I think oftentimes we don't see what we're naturally good at.
Right.
Because we think we always have to work at it to get to be that.
Or it's born into someone else, right?
Yeah.
We look at those people like the Tony Robbinses, and we look at all those and we're like, well, if I was supposed to be Tony Robbins, I would have been born Tony Robbins, not realizing that Tony Robbins had this exact same feeling.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it.
Yeah.
So I was just sitting there at my desk, and I just prayed. I just said, you know, if you want me to do this, to be inspiring and to help people to achieve in their life and to see them, you know, see themselves or something better, then give me the source of it. Give me the source. What is the book? What's the source? Because I don't want to parrot whatever, you know, what everybody else is saying. And in all honesty, my prayer was, how did Zig Ziglar get his start? What inspired him or Tony Robbins? Like, and I thought, no, I know what Tony Robbins got to start. I'm like, what inspired him? What did he read? What did he go to that caused him to speak from? And what was his, you know, what was his Bible per se? And in my prayer, I'm like, and don't tell me it's the Bible. If you tell me it's the Bible, I'm out. I'm not going to, don't say this.
Yeah.
I had a manager one time, he's like, the best leadership book is the Bible. I'm like, no, it's not. Don't tell me that. I did it.
Although Zig Ziglar very influenced by Christianity.
Yeah. And no disrespect to that. I'm just like, no, I want something other than that. I have that already.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So that was it. So that was my, and 5 days later, this guy comes to me and says, he's a neighbor of mine, and he goes, I don't know why I'm doing this, but there's a book on my shelf that my dad used to teach us leadership and to teach us moral character and all this stuff. And he goes, and I just been thinking, like, I need to give it to you. He goes, and I know you're into Tony Robbins and all this current stuff. He says, so I feel stupid giving you this book because it's so old. And I didn't think anything of it. And he gives me this book, and I look at it, I'm like, this is cool. And I'm like, wow, this book is super old. And he's like, yeah, just give it back to me in a year or whatever after you read it. And so a couple days later, I take it to work with me, and I just have this moment of where I have like 10 minutes, and I open the book and I start reading it, and something that said would just hit me. And it said something like, for every hour in a man's life, there's a specific work to be done. And when that work is, or the hour has passed and the work has not been done, the opportunity is lost. Dude, that just like hit me. I'm like, that's me. And then the title, the chapter title was Possibilities in Spare Moments. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right now. I just opened this book, and for 10 minutes, I'm sitting in my truck. Oh my gosh. And that's me. And then I just heard this in my head of, this is the book you asked for.
Right.
Now go do it.
Right. But that phrase, that statement, like there's multiple ways. I've got a very, very good friend of mine that introduced me to the concept of shadow mission, right? Which states that if you have the ability and the time to be able to do something and you're called to it, this is a spiritual thing, right? It's more of a universe thing, whatever you believe, right? This is not a preaching hour, but if you choose not to do it, now you stand against that thing, right? If the phone would have rang and I would have gotten asked to go on that very first undercover mission to do rescues of those little girls, and I would have said no, right? Then now all of a sudden I stand for that very thing. Right. Which is this is such an impactful thing, because we think that, all right, well, I'm not chasing after my dreams. I won't get my house. Right. I'm not chasing after my dreams. I won't get that car. Like, no big deal. Rich people suck anyway. Right. And it's no big deal. So we forget that the fact that that these struggles in our lives are put in front of us for us to become more. Not to gain more, not to get more. It's for us to become more. And we never know the end result of us acting, and we also don't know the end of us not acting. So if you have something in your heart, you're watching this, you're listening to this on iTunes or iHeartRadio or wherever you're listening to it, and you feel this or you hear this message, it's a call directly to the bottom of your soul to say you are meant. If you're called, if you have the prompting or in prayer or in meditation or however it is that you get it, that you're supposed to do something, keep in mind that not just, okay, I'm not going to do this. Maybe I don't make $1 million. Maybe, I continue to struggle at $60,000 a year, whatever it is. Keep in mind that the biggest impact that I've had, that you've had, that everybody that I've had as guests on the show will tell you is that they had no idea the impact of them acting in a moment where they normally would retreat. And so I wanted to expand on that a little bit because it's so powerful, what you just said.
No, you know what? It's interesting you say that because I remember sitting at Tony Robbins and he said, I think he was talking about something, it was like the chemistry of transformation. And he said that, you experience pain and then that pain becomes over and over to a point where it becomes saturated. And he says, and then you become so frustrated because that pain is so saturating in your life. The frustration becomes so great, you understand and you come to a decision subconsciously that I got to make a change.
Right. Something's
got to change. He goes, and then you'll have this moment of insight. And if you don't step into that moment, you remain frustrated.
That's right.
And honestly,
which comes from this book that was written
a
long time ago. We'll get a little into that history, but go ahead and keep advancing the story.
That was where I was at, in this frustration. And anyway, when Tony said that a number of years ago, I remember thinking, I was at Date with Destiny. I thought, that concept is super important to me. I know what he's talking about. I know that moment because I have done it. I know that moment. And I was thinking, and that years ago, I have to go recognize when that moment comes again because that's when my life changes. Right. When I can recognize when that moment is happening.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, so it was kind of crazy. It was like that movie Signs where everything all, fits in.
Right.
And anyway, so I read that part of that book and I hear this voice in my head saying, this is what you asked for. Now go do what you said you would do. And I just cried, thinking, oh my gosh, it's here and I'm scared. I thought this being here would make me confident. I'm more scared than when I was a week ago. Like,
because now you got to do stuff different.
Yeah,
right? You can't act the same way. Yeah. You're like, oh no, now I know it, and now I have to do something about it. And then the doing, you're going to start doing things that are not what you're used to doing, which are, although it's a prison, although it's this is why people call it a comfort zone, because it's comfortable doing what you know. Now all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to step out. There's this brand new movie out that I can't remember the name of it, but brand new movie. I just watched it with my kids. It's a cartoon, right? And it's about these trolls. And one of his things is casting a spell that's an invisible bridge, right? And he has to cast it. And he's like, I don't see the bridge. He's like, well, that's it. You have to believe so much in it that when you step out that it's there. And he cast it. And the first time he fell through it because he didn't believe, which is a lot like us. The first time we step out, we go, wow, this is not for me. What was I thinking? Yeah. And then all of a sudden you get back up. And if you have the guts to try again, the next time you step out, you're like, and you step out and there's something to stand on, right? There's something that's solid. And then you take another step and another step. And it takes you completely away from the thing that you were comfortable with. Sometimes people that you're comfortable with, sometimes a job that you were comfortable with, sometimes a relationship or a way of being, what time you woke up in the morning, those types of things. And now you're just stepping out and you're going, I don't know what's next, but it's better than what was back there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well put.
So what happened next?
So I went and I met with a friend of mine, Toby Roberts, and a couple of days later I met with her and said, Toby, I'm going to sound totally crazy. I'm like, but you know me, I'm not crazy. I'm like, God told me that Zig Ziglar got to start with this book. And that means I have to do this. And I kind of told her that whole story. And I said, oh my gosh. And what I loved about that moment was that she felt it, believed it, and championed that moment. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm here in this moment with you. This is awesome. We're going to remember this forever. Something,
Right.
That was the essence of that. And she's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. don't pressure me. Like, I don't know what all this means. And I said, well, I still want to know. She's like, have you looked at it or researched? I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I can't verify this, but
it was just a gut.
I just knew, like, I felt it, like I heard it, like this was it. And anyway, so that happened. And then, long story, but I gave her a copy of the book and I wrapped it a special way. I'd wrapped it, like with twine, and did a wax stamp. I wrapped it in the era that the book was written.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Craft paper, twine, wax seal. And I did that because I literally heard that in my head too. I'm like, wrap it in the era that it was written. And I had this image of what it looked like. And I thought, that's crazy. I'm not going to do that. And then, like, do it. And I thought, that is insane. But I did it. Mm-hmm. And I got her a copy of the book, and I wrapped it. I wrapped her, that book in that way, and I gave it to her. And she loved it so much. What was crazy was she loved it so much, she posted it on Facebook and said, look how this gift was wrapped. It was awesome. And this is the book. And look how old this book is. And she said all of these things. And then the next day when I saw her, she says, some guy made a comment on my Facebook post. Did you see it? And I said, no. She's like, no, he made a comment. He said just what you said almost. I think he knows what you need to know. That's what she said.
And you and I don't know each other.
And I don't know. Yeah. I said, who is it? Yeah. And I said, who is it? And she says, this guy I met at a business event or something. And she's like, I don't know him, but you should just talk to him. And again, I had that same feeling of, oh my gosh, am I really going to do this? Like, I don't know this guy. And she gave me she's like, just do it. And so that was on a Friday. I remember that because Saturday morning when I woke up, I was debating on whether or not I was going to do it. And so I looked you up, and Saturday morning I just thought, I just got to do this. I just got to step into this. And I remember what Tony Robbins said. I thought, I just got to step into it. Who cares?
Right.
And I sent you a message and said, hey, I don't know if I know you don't know me, but you made a comment on my friend's Facebook post, and I just need to know how you know that book. Mm-hmm. And like 10 minutes later, you responded, oh, I got that book as a recommendation from Zig Ziglar. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, what? And then we scheduled that meeting to call you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the whole thing is interesting. I mean, he picked up the phone. We had a very long conversation. And I didn't know this, but he had me on speakerphone in front of his team. And, but I'll reverse the story just a little bit of what happened with me. Tony Robbins gave me my start in speaking. I spoke for him, did a lot of work with him. And then when I left him, I was like, all right, I'm going to go out on my own. I got back in while I was actually with Tony. I started buying companies again, that kind of thing. And that's really what I do. I buy companies that were struggling or there was no pass off plan to the kids. There was no kids, whatever. And I would buy these companies that were hurting and fix them up and kind of keep them. And, but there was a period of time where I thought I wanted to be Tony Robbins, right? Everybody has that thought. At some point in time, you go, I want to be that guy, right? I want to be that guy. But then you forget about the 40 years he put into it. And you're like, well, I don't know if I want to wait 40 years or if it's even meant for us, right? Because in every one of us, the example in Tony Robbins has always been just be you at your maximum potential, right? I think every religion can be boiled down to the idea that we are supposed to get as good as we can for the purpose of serving other people. And a lot of people get miserable when they go, I'm supposed to get as good as I am. And that means big house, big car, big this, big that, lots of money, the fame, the fortune, when it's nothing. And that is absolutely nothing. It's emptiness. It's less than a sugar high because it doesn't even taste sweet when you get there. I've been there, done that, lost everything a couple of times. And so that's the greatest example of Tony is if you want to be Tony Robbins, then be you and get to be the best you can be at your skills and your talents, and don't give up on that for 40 years, right? And then what happens in 40 years? So that happened, and then I decided that I was going to do some speaking while I was buying companies and do this kind of stuff. So I was traveling around and ended up in Dallas, and there's a lot of really crazy things that happened in Dallas. It was a weird time. Okay. And I know that I was being tested of what direction do I go with my career. I lost a ton of money in a couple of deals, and then, but at that period of time, I met somebody who knew Zig, right? And Zig's office, prior to him passing, it was in Dallas, Texas. And she said, I think that Zig, because Zig has had an impact on so many people, right? And I think that he's going to want to meet you. And I got personally invited by Zig to come into his office, met him, and then he's like, I want to bring you back to talk to my people. And so I did. I presented to Zig Ziglar and his team. And at the time, he was still with us mentally. It was evolving, and he would repeat things a few times and whatnot, but he was still very, very much there. And he has this wall in his office where it's kind of his wall of fame, right? And it has his wife up there, the redhead, and one of the ladies that raised him and really brought him to Christianity, and Mary Kay Ash. And, there's all of these really, really impactful people. So we got to the end of that. Now, I'm not starstruck by people. I've been around so many people now at this point, but Zig Ziglar, man, like to be in the presence of a man who has brought so many people through so many times with just the voice. Talk about not knowing the breadth and scope of who he was. He's a humble man. When I met him, he just gave credit and praise to all other people. And so we get to the end of this thing, and he said, Jason, he said, you want to know the book that most influenced me in my career and my life? And I was like, oh my God, yes, right? I'm like, no, I'm not interested. But he said, he mentioned the name of the book, Pushing to the Front by Orison Swett Martin. And I'd never, ever heard of that before. And so I was like, I've never heard of that before. And he goes, look, I may have a copy here, right? And he sent somebody looking around, and he actually had 3 or 4 copies of it and personally gave me a copy of the very book that's sitting in front of us right now. And I read it. And again, you go to the foundational piece of all motivational, right? And he told me another story, which I hope people hear this because it's so important. He said, did you know that in writing this book, and we'll just show a little copy because this is the old version. It's literally by a typewriter if you feel it on really old stuff. There's an inscription in here from 1897, right? December 25th, it's washed out, but you can see it. And this was handwritten. He was living in the top of a barn and renting it out, and he'd handwritten all of this. And gets to the end of it and goes into town to grab something to eat, and the barn burns down. The first time, and no copies, no nothing. If you can imagine, look at all these papers, and handwritten, and how time that was. There was no backup systems back at the time. There was nothing, and the barn burns down with his manuscript inside of it. And so what did he do? Did he quit? Did he give up? No. He wrote it, and somewhere, I don't know if it was Zig that told me or something I read later on, was he said that original version was meant to die because there was too much of me in it and not enough of other people, right? That switch from I want to get to be the best I can be, and that leaves ego out because now you're in constant service. You're in constant love with the outcomes of other people rather than, trying to make yourself be bigger than you need to be. And nobody really gives a shit anyway, right? And the people who do, by the way, you don't want them in your life. You don't want them in your life because they're the first to disappear when things get rough. So that book there's so many lessons in this. And then we're having the conversation and you're like, dude, I was looking for the source. And we have never met each other. It was just by random. And I commented on Toby's thing. I'm like, oh my God, that is the greatest book, blah, 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 blah. And that's how we got connected.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll always remember how I started that conversation and said, Jason, I know you don't know me. Mm-hmm. I don't know you. I'm like, I don't know if you believe in God or what you believe, what way. Mm-hmm. I know nothing about you. I said, but even if you don't believe in God, I have enough faith for the both of us to have this conversation. I'm like, I just need to have this conversation. What?
Yeah.
We gotta talk.
Which is another, and again, I wanted to point that part of the story out because you reached out to me, and when we originally, had the conversation, you had a little bit of trepidation. You're like, Jason, I know you're successful this. I know that you know that Tony Robbins, da 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 da. Don't know if you're even going to take the time to have a conversation with me.
Yeah, that's right. I was like, because I was asking Toby, who is this guy? Right. She's like, yeah, he's pretty successful. And I'm like, oh, is he even going to talk to me?
Yeah, and we had a great conversation.
Yeah.
And the idea why I want to point that out is because if there's somebody that you are thinking about reaching out to that may be above your station or more successful, it's all bullcrap. We are all human beings. Right. And I've met this from some of the biggest celebrities that I've ever met, and some of the people that are prisoners, that we're all just people, and money is such a poor indicator of the quality of a human being. So anyway, what happened next?
So that was it. I had told the people in this meeting, I just said, I kind of told them my story, and I said, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know this guy, but I always tell you to take risk in your life, and I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to put you on speaker. Don't say a word. I don't know, what he'll say, but let's just have this conversation and let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
And honestly, I was so nervous because I felt like I was either going to be debunked, or whatever. I just thought, I have no idea, but here we go.
Right.
So that was it. So I called you, you answered the phone, and that was it.
We had a great conversation.
Yeah.
Cool. So there's a lot of lessons in that. This book is obviously phenomenal. If you can get your hands on a copy of it, it's amazing. And I want to advance it just a little bit in the story, because then we became friends. And you came to my office one day and we had a really great conversation. And you said something, and I don't know what direction you're going to go with your speaking. I don't know what your subject is going to be. I want you to also see, he's like, I'm just doing title. Look, he's built up a very successful title business. He's been able to feed his family. He's been able to buy the homes, be on the trips, do the things that are out there. And I want you to see in him is that he's not giving himself credit for the success that he has had in life, because maybe it doesn't, comparison, right? Comparison is one of those things that's a killer of all enthusiasm. And so you are, I want to tell you, you're very successful in the things that you've overcome, because it's comparative to where we started, not a comparative of somebody else that may have had a better start or they're doing better. Because what is better? I know so many people that are ultra wealthy that are miserable, right? And so just to say that's where we should be, I want you to give yourself more credit for that. I'm doing it publicly, so you get more credit for this. But at the end of the day, you sat down and we had a conversation, and you were talking to me about your relationship with your wife. I'm not going to divulge any of the things, but I will tell you the gist that really changed the way that I approached the relationship to my ex-wife and to any relationship in the future. And I've told this story probably 50 times now, so who knows how many people it's impacted. But you sat down and you told me, you said, look, I woke up one day in tears, or maybe you were going to bed. I don't remember the particulars, but in tears, thinking to myself that every conflict that I've had in my life with my wife has been because I was trying to get my point across. And her pushing back on me is her calling in life, instead of looking at it like, oh, we're fighting, or you're complaining, or whatever it is. You looked at it like, that's what I needed to hear from somebody who knows me and loves me the most. I need to hear that and start looking at that like a blessing, instead of something that is somebody's just complaining about me or complaining to me. And you just said you broke down in tears. And I was like, man, that is powerful. If we look at every interaction with some of us that somebody's pushing back against us, we should be grateful for that pushback, because it gives us an opportunity to look at ourselves, to modify, or to be like, you know what, they're not home team, right? If they're not home team, then they shouldn't be infecting you with their ideas. But if they're home team, like your wife, and you've got this long-standing relationship, and she's raised your children and taking care of you and taking care of the home, then man, I want to listen to that person because they love me. Right. And to be grateful for that feedback, that was something that transformed me. and and you're more than welcome to expound upon that if you like.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When we had that first conversation over the phone, you said something to me at the end of that conversation. And you said, your weaknesses are designed to make those who don't believe in you leave you. That's why you have weaknesses. They are to frustrate the hell out of the people around you, and so they hate you, and then they leave you.
Right.
And he says, and they're also there so that those who see you, see your gift and who you are, you will know them because they will see your weaknesses as trivial, as it doesn't matter because look what you're able to do. It doesn't matter because look at this. And you said that, and I remember getting emotional. I got tears in my eyes you were saying that, because I thought, I've seen that in my company, the people that have stayed, I'm not perfect, that
Shocker. Well, now I'm ending this damn thing.
But like, I'm not as good as I thought it was anyway. But I realized, like, those people who've stayed, they have said those same things to me. They said, "Oh my gosh, the value and the impact you give me is far greater than the chaos or whatever that's happening in the moment." And that changed me in that moment. It gave me like comfort and peace, thinking, oh, so where I think I'm an idiot is okay. And where I know, then the people that love me see my gift, and then I just have to focus on bringing that gift out.
Right.
And I realized, honestly, when you said that, I was thinking, my wife is the best at finding, is telling me everything I do wrong. Oh, wait, she's still with me. Oh my gosh. It really hit me. Like
Rewires.
Yeah.
Rewires.
As a joke, I would say that to her, like, your superpower.
Your superpower.
Like, if you were a mutant or you were whatever, your superpower would be to find the one thing I did wrong all day.
That's right. That's right. Well, here's how I want to wrap this up. Thank you for spending the time.
Yeah.
But publicly, I had this conversation with you sort of privately, and I don't really give a shit how you feel about what's about to happen. Okay. But what
I didn't think you did. I didn't think you ever thought it did.
But what I want to do is I want to challenge you, here publicly, that whatever your calling is, whatever it is that you're meant to be, because you're a gentle soul, you're a loving soul, you're whip smart. You've got so many talents that I don't have, that other people don't have. There's a whole slew of human beings out of 7.3 or 7.4 billion people that are on the face of the planet that will not like me, that will be attached to you and that will be attached to your message. And I just want to say that, today, what is today? Today is March 11th of 2020. And I want you to clarify your message. I want you to get on more stages, and I want you to get your voice heard out there in this world at a much higher level than you've been doing it. Do you accept that challenge?
100%. That's why I'm here.
Good. So Misfit Nation, you now know Lou Hamner, who you can see him on my Facebook. Those of you that went to Unstoppable. By the way, how was your experience with Unstoppable? Tell the people. So should they come to the next one, or was it boring?
No, 100%. It was. It's funny because I've gone to a lot of those events, those types of events, and I went there not knowing totally what to expect. Right, it was the first time I think, or
we were supposed to do this interview there.
Yeah,
and it didn't happen.
And I sat there, and it was like building this momentum. Every speaker said something, and it was just like moving this freight train. Like it started to go. And honestly, I got done at the end of the day. I thought, I feel so inspired. And although the speaker didn't have the time, right, to get into the meat of whatever it was, what it gave me was the inspiration of how I needed to act differently, and the things that, and I saw them as resources of, oh my gosh, I can now go to them, because if they had a message that caused me to see how I needed to respond differently to life, that means they have the answer to how I need to respond differently. They have it. And so it was super engaging and powerful for me, because the speakers were natural. They were real people. It didn't feel like I was being sold at something. They were like, I just want to help you. What can I give you right now?
Right.
Almost like, if I could solve your problem right now, let's just solve it and move you on. I don't care.
Yeah.
So it was just authentic. Everybody there, and there was no ego. That's the other thing I kept thinking. I don't feel anybody's ego. Nobody's trying to say, look how great I am. Nobody said it. They got up and shared their biggest struggle, their biggest doubt, their pain in their life, and just said, you know what, and I overcame it. And as a result of getting through that trial, I created this business. Guess what?
Right.
And I saw them as me, and I thought, no, that's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah. And
it was just real. It wasn't just the authenticity. And I said this, I said they were authentic and vulnerable. And those two things are the alpha and the omega of inspiration and breakthroughs.
And radically competent, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. And that was what we built it out for. 20, like, you don't want a TED Talk, which is 15 minutes. It's too short. You don't want 45 minutes because that gets curated. Like, that's the amount of time where speakers turn it into a sales pitch for themselves. And so we picked 25 minutes. It's not enough time to get into the meat, but there's plenty of time for you to hang out. You had all the time in the world to meet with the speakers and have conversations. And we've set it up to where if you want to go talk to them, then you can go talk to them on your terms, you know, in 15-minute increments, one-on-one with all the speakers. We didn't do that this time, but that's going to be one of the enhancements that we make for October. And we did this. It was perfectly curated. And I didn't know what was going to happen. Lou and I was talking about this before we started the show. I didn't know what was going to happen. I could have flopped. Nobody could have come, you know, but we ended up filling up the room and we had a great time. And the outcome for the audience was exactly what I saw in my mind. And so now I'm on fire to make sure that more people are able to experience that as opposed to a pitch fest. So
it was awesome.
I'm glad you were there, and you've been to tons. So
it was awesome.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So anyways, thank you all very, very much. Definitely get on Facebook, look up Louis, push him, prod him, joke with him, make sure that he's out on stages, make sure that he's getting his message curated, make sure that we help this man take his voice and to expound upon the world, because we need you, brother.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. Love you all. We'll see you at the next episode of the Bald Avenger Show.